Travels of the Ellis Arbor is an audio narrative set in the world of Bastion using 5e compatible characters. Tune in for episode 29, Possession. With a sharp click, the handle of their chamber door opened as both Darian and Ed stepped into a dark corridor. Light from the interior of the well spilled across the way, revealing a long, narrow corridor, dripping with moisture and long abandoned to the whims of grime. A strange feeling overcame the captain as they ventured forth. He could count the number of times on one hand he'd been led by another, especially into a dangerous situation. He had little choice but to trust in the insight that this voice within Ed offered. Surely it was in his best interest to follow, to watch, and to decide for himself what would happen next. Their quiet steps through winding corridors and empty rooms led them through a decrepit lair. It appeared that many chambers of this horrid oubliette had been abandoned. Food left to rot, candles left to burn, and a scattering of broken glass and timber in every corner. Much of the debris was swept to the side, giving the pair an uneasy path to follow. Clearly, there was evidence that somewhere, something had been living in these chambers. As they crept, they noticed a handful of interesting phenomena. Books lie open on drawing tables, with a strange black scroll written in the margins. Sometimes the scrolls carried off the page and onto the table, creating crude arcana warped by obsessive scratching. Thankfully, the writing in each case was only ink, not some horrid ichor or blood. Though, as they both assumed, the ink must have been the kind used by wizards and arcanists, the kind used for spellcraft and incantations. Suddenly, a loud crash and a scattering of rubble as they heard stones shift and fall in the corridor beyond. Darian drew his pistol once again, while Edward held his rifle aloft. Something had made that noise, something either as lost or as dangerous as the two of them. Though, as Darian peered around the corner into the darkness, a flash of green gave him pause, and a sigh of relief left his lungs. Clambering over a pile of broken wall, it appeared as if a small, green-skinned creature had crashed through one of the interior chambers. Dusting off their coat and belongings, and clutching a scrap of dried vellum, it was easy enough to see that Nout had wandered into the same corridor as the pair.
Nout, you could care to be a little more subtle.
The captain continued in more hushed tones, hoping not to attract any wayward attention.
What on earth is going on here? Why are you destroying this place? Give me your explanation quick, so we can leave. I know not what might have stirred from your crash.
Steady, Captain, steady. There's nothing to worry about. I've been wandering the corridors for some time now. It's nice to see a familiar face, though. Or any face at all. This place is deserted. Here.
Nout stood upright and folded a handful of paper scrolls into Darian's grasp. They appeared in good condition, with a myriad of arcane scratches across the page.
I came upon these while lurking in what I can only assume was Araquio's study. They're spell scrolls. I thought they might come in handy. More so if we take one each.
Darian stared agog at his artificer as he tilted his head toward Edward. A sly smugness had already crept onto Ed's face.
Need I say more? You're certain of this? This is the dwelling of that wizard, of our patron.
Nout coughed loudly as a cloud of dust leapt from his body. Clearing the rest of his face and placing his goggles onto his head, he replied with a quizzical tone.
Oh yes, I'm absolutely certain. What's more, I've seen her. She's locked in a kind of mania. I thought for sure she'd notice me around the corner of the chamber. Turns out she's much more interested in whatever it was she was doing.
Darian paused. The silence grew into a cold and blanketed dread across the three of them.
And the rest of the crew? What of Carpathian and more?
Sadly, yes, I found them too. They're locked in a similar stasis. From what I briefly glanced at, I think they're part of a kind of experiment. Had I not woken, I think I was bound for a similar fate.
The captain's tone shifted once more, starting toward Nout with a fierce disposition.
Where are they? We must release them immediately. There's no time to lose.
Okay, we can go. I'm just glad to have found you. I don't think I'd be much good on my own. What about you, Ed?
All the while, Edward stood a little ways off, fiddling with the dials on his gun. Without turning to look at Nout or the captain, he replied in a confident, brushed tone.
Perhaps now you learn to accept my wisdom. I can be of help, but you'll need to be a little more accommodating in the future.
Darian spun on his right heel, staring down the creature within Edward's mind.
You're going to have to elaborate. Edward may be used to taking orders, but I am not part of your merry band. Let me do what I do, and I'm certain I'll be able to get us out of this predicament, as alive as possible.
The tension bubbled for but a moment longer before Darian agreed to their terms. And so, creeping through the dusty corridors, both Edward and the captain followed closely behind Nout as they scoured the winding halls of Oraquiel's domain. More and more unusual implements lay bare. Where once there were scratchings of arcana, the very walls were lined with a deep crimson ink. Esoteric rites and occult spells in partial states of completion, clearly in an attempt to raise obscuring wards. The madness and disparity between incomplete spellcasting projects alluded to the true nature of their beneficiary. It would take a true wizard to decipher such runes, but an absolute madness would become of one that attempted to understand their use. Finally, creeping around the singular, narrow hallway, lined with a deep viridian rug and gilded with golden candelabra, they could hear it. The quiet, whispered and scattered ramblings of a voice. Though the voice they heard did not match the one they'd heard from the wizard. That same musical rhythm was replaced by a manic and scratchy cadence. One that seemed to cause Ed to leave a few paces behind the group. Something seemed wrong. Even to the voice within Edward, this was not right. And as if to punctuate the unease, the same scratchy voice began to bark into the corridor. Loudly. Loud enough to know that their presence had been noticed.
Oh my, it appears we have some guests, magical ones. Yes, indeed, it appears your friends have come for a visit. Why don't you introduce me? Yes, that would be only proper.
Stepping round to see the form of Oraquiel slumped over a low table. Her form beneath her wizarding garb seemed to writhe uncomfortably as she turned to meet their entrance. Hunched over in this way, she appeared more like a witch from a fairy tale. Garbed in her off-colored robe and with her peaked hat at an awkward angle. Even so, her piercing green eyes gave off a fiery glint as they turned to meet them.
Well, look at you all, replete with such vigor, tenacity, and something else. Oh, yes, that appears to be curiosity. I bet you have so many questions about what wonderful secrets your friends and I are about to...
The voice stopped. She had met the gaze of Edward and broke hard. Her flickering, maddening composure was struck, turning into one of shock and dismay. She gasped loud enough to hear her lungs rattle and her garb pulled tight around her writhing body.
You? No, you can't be here. I left you where I found you last. You're meant to be at home. You're not meant to see. No, go away!
Edward stepped forward, his gun now pointing squarely at the wizard.
Ah, I see. Now I understand why our paths are so perilously intertwined. It seems the hells won't finish toying with our ambitions. Caliban.
Ah, it is you! No, who sent you? Was it Father? Icky, Ikitha. Not this time. You can't stop me. I'll stop you! Yes, I will.
The very room seemed to drip with darkness as Araquiel's garb began to rip and tear, revealing a monster most foul from within. Travels of the Ellis Arbor is made possible by the generous support of our subscribers, followers, and most notably, our patrons. Thanks to all our Moon, Wedge, Crown, and Hex tier patrons for supporting us so far on this journey. Please subscribe, give a like or a comment, follow us on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next episode. Make sure to follow us here on YouTube, on Spotify, and on twitch.tv/lonomy. Don't forget, take care of each other.